Okay, the title of my Dhamma talk this morning is actually entitled Transcending Self-Restraint with Kanti. Okay, Kanti, as you know, is a Pali term, and essentially it means patience and acceptance. Okay, and in respect of self-restraint, I had actually spoken in detail and elaborated in detail what actually self-restraint entails and why it's important for us to be well restrained and to actually guard our six sense doors. You know? Because it's actually through the six sense doors that the sense objects impinge on us, and that's how when we react to this sense objects that come into contact, that impinge on our sense doors, that's where these defilements actually arise in respect of greed, aversion, and delusion. So it is very important for us to be well restrained, and also guard our six sense doors diligently and consistently. So let me just go through, perhaps in brief, just the essence of what I've actually covered. Like I spoke about last week, in terms of self-restraint. First of all, I actually explained what self-restraint is, and in this regard, I actually referred you to this Anguttara Nikaya 4.69, where the Buddha actually spoke about 4 efforts, and these 4 efforts actually comprise what? Efforts to restrain, to give up, to develop, and to preserve. Okay, and the Buddha actually explained what is this effort to restrain. So when you look at the Buddha's explanation, the effort to restrain here, the Buddha is actually asking you, when you restrain, you must generate the enthusiasm. You must make the effort and exert the mind, strive so that you must actually strive really hard so that bad, unskillful qualities don't arise in you. So that is the effort to restrain. This is what the Blessed One actually explained, in terms of self-restraint. So when you look at it, the self-restraint, this restraint itself, if you look at it carefully, is actually part of the Noble Eightfold Path, right, in terms of right effort. Because right effort actually entails the effort to ensure that unwholesome, unskillful qualities or Dhamma don't arise within you. And if they do arise, you have to make the effort to quickly eradicate, and to uproot and remove them, with much effort. That's what the Buddha actually asks us to do. So that's why, if you look at it, self-restraint is actually something that's very important, because it's actually part of the Noble Eightfold Path, and you must actually have the effort to restrain these defilements, to prevent them from arising. And if they have arisen, you must make sure that you remove them and uproot them. At all effort, you must actually make that enthusiasm. So if you look at this sutta, right, it actually makes you wonder, right? Because sometimes some meditation teachers actually teach you, when you look at defilements, just look at them with dispassion, just look at them, observe, when they come, just say arise, or anger, greed has arisen in me, and just come back to your primary object, and just and do not dwell too much on the anger, and just look at it, how it comes and goes. But this is actually not what the Buddha actually asks us to do. When the Buddha asks you to restrain, you must make the effort. Means you must contemplate, and you must actually confront the defilements face to face, and use wisdom to combat and to battle with the defilements. So that's what Buddha actually asks us to do, in terms of restraint. And again, I actually highlighted in terms of restraint, it's actually very important for us, because like for lay people, when we perform and when we progress on the spiritual path, when we perform dana, sila, bhavana, it is very it is actually very easy for these defilements to arise in us. For example, like I mentioned last week, when you do dana, it is actually very it's not unusual for some Buddhists, because they are actually they're hungry for merits. So whenever they find highly developed or maybe highly cultivated monks, then they will throng towards there and perform dana. Okay, that's fine, but it's just that when they perform dana, their intentions are being tainted by this greed, because they think that by amassing these merits, may these merits be for my gain, for my personal gain, So when you actually have this intention in your mind that you want the dana merits to accrue for yourself or for your personal merits, the Buddha in Anguttara Nikaya in the book of 8, the Buddha says if you actually have this intention when you do dana, then it is actually quite a pity, because in the end you only end up being reborn in the lowest heavenly realm, which is actually the heaven of the 4 great heavenly kings, which is Chatu Maharajica Deva. When you could have actually attained a higher rebirth, but because of this, your intention of dana is being tainted, by greed. So that's why it actually results in lower heavenly realm, as compared to if you make the aspiration, that by virtue of this dana, may these merits be a supportive condition, for me to have the opportunity to meditate, to actually get out of samsara as soon as possible. If you actually make this resolution, the Buddha says, then it is very highly likely that you will be reborn in the Brahma world. Because if you get reborn in the 4 heavenly heaven of the 4 heavenly kings, once your good karma is exhausted, and then you actually descend, or you descend back, as a human being, or come back again to the human realm. But if you actually reborn in the Brahma world, then from there, you won't come back to the human realm, and from there you actually attain liberation, and so that is how important being well restrained is, and also in terms of sila as well. It is very important for you to catch the intention. When you want to do something, in actually observing your morality, your sila, it's very important for you to catch that intention. That volitional formation in your mind. So for example, before you do something, you catch that thought, before you do something, like for example, before you even, swipe at the mosquito, you actually catch that thought, I have this intention to kill. Then if you actually observe and restrain yourself, when you actually catch this thought of anger in you that arises because you want to actually swipe at the mosquito, then, you'll be able to observe your sila, much better. Or before you decide to actually utter harsh speech, then you catch the intention, and because you catch intention because you're well guarded, your sati is actually in the 6 sense doors, so you're able to catch the intention before it actually comes out from you in terms of harsh speech, or you've actually restrained yourself, by not uttering the harsh speech. So that's why you're able to preserve your sila much more effectively. And also in terms of meditation, as I mentioned to you last week, in this world, we are actually faced with these 8 conditions, that keep sweeping us from time to time. The gain and loss, the praise and blame, the repute and disrepute, pleasure and pain. These are the 8 things that they keep on swaying us, and they spin after the world all the time. So if you're not well restrained, and you don't actually guard your sense door, it is very, very easy for states of sadness or depression that to creep into you, because when you're faced with loss or blame, then you feel very unhappy, and you feel very depressed. That's how people get into depression, because when they're faced with these conditions, they are pulled into this whirlpool. They keep on churning in their mind. Why does this happen to me? What's going to happen to me? Why must it be me? So you keep on thinking and churning in your mind. Then you find that you're falling deeper and deeper into the hole. So the Buddha says that it's very important for you to be well restrained. So you must actually guard your 6 sense doors. So what is arising in your mind? Is there lobha? Is there dosa? Is there moha? Greed, hatred, and delusion, are they arising? If they have arisen, make sure you combat them, and you make sure that you battle with them, and using the tools of wisdom. Okay, not by suppressing, like what psychologists tell us that to suppress, but it's not suppressing. Here you are actually combating them with wisdom, as well as abandonment. Okay, abandonment, you abandon this. So I also went through with you this Sutta SN 3.5, where the Buddha actually told King Pasenadi, how do you actually guard your 6 sense doors? And the Buddha here explained, it's important for us to have internal protection. And the Buddha says to restrain ourselves, it is actually to restrain your body, speech, and mind. Okay, and I also went through this Dhammapada verse 3.391, where the Buddha again highlights the 3 ways of restraining, which is actually body, speech, and mind. And if you can do this, you are called a true Brahmin. And of course, in AN 3.52, again, I highlighted also this sutta about these two old, aged men, who were about 120 years old. They came to the Buddha because they were very, anxious. They knew that, they were towards the end of their lives, but they had not done anything, any good merits, any deeds or any good merits that will actually help them, after, in the next life. And so they were very afraid, and they went to see the Buddha, and they asked the Buddha, Master Gautama, please instruct us, how should we do, for long-term benefit and happiness, but we haven't done any good deeds. So the Buddha actually asked them, yes, you are actually in this advanced stage of your life, and so here you must actually ensure that you restrain, you put in the effort to restrain your body, speech and mind, and that will be your shelter, your island, and your refuge after death, in the world beyond. The Buddha says that is actually, your best protector, is yourself. You need to actually be restrained in your body, speech and mind. Whenever any sense objects impinge on you, you must be able to be restrained, to be well restrained, and to make sure these unwholesome states don't arise. And if they arise, you need to ensure that they're removed, as soon as possible, using your effort. Okay, and again in AN 3.105, we know, you need to restrain your body, speech and mind. But in AN 3.105, the Buddha says, all of these three, body, speech and mind, what is the most important? The Buddha says the most important is your mind. You must guard your mind at all times, because mind is the forerunner of all things, So you must actually guard your mind, otherwise everything is going to be, your speech as well as your action, your bodily action are going to be affected, because of your mind is actually tainted. So the Buddha gave this very beautiful simile about this house, that has got a poor, it's actually a poorly thatched roof, and it's actually leaking. So during heavy rains, the rain will seep into the house, and because of that, the walls, the pillars, will all be unprotected and become soggy. So it's the same goes for the mind. If your mind is not protected, everything, what you speak, what you do, what you think, all these are going to be affected and tainted. So the mind is the forerunner of all things. That's why the Buddha emphasizes a lot. You must always guard your mind. Be on your guard and watch your mind. Okay, that's the Buddha is actually highlighting this. And then again, next we also explore the question. Okay, guarding the mind is important, but how do you guard the mind? Okay, for that I actually refer you to SN 35.93, where the Buddha actually talk about dependent arising, of the five aggregates, right? So the Buddha is saying that, you see, dependence of I and form, I consciousness arises, and the coming together of these three things, the I, the form, and the consciousness, is actually called contact. And when there's contact, there's feeling, intention, and perception. Okay, so as I highlighted before, feeling and perceptions are qualities that you have no control over. Okay, how you feel, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, or how you perceive something, it depends on how you've been conditioned, how your mind has been conditioned. So you have no control over it. But what you have control is that your intention, because intention is your sankhara. Because when you act, you need to make sure that you act. Your action is not tainted with lobha, dosa, and moha, which is greed, hatred, and delusion. Because greed, hatred, and delusion, where do they originate? This hate and this greed, hatred, lobha, dosa, and moha, they have a common root. These three things are rooted on what? On ignorance. So ignorance is actually the fuel that actually causes lobha, dosa, moha to arise. So that's why the Buddha actually says, for you to actually actually guard yourself, for you to actually guard your mind, for you to actually guard your mind, like what I mentioned in the previous sutta, you must actually watch and guard your mind. So you must actually guard your what? You must actually guard your six sense doors, right? Because it is because of the I and the form, that this intention arises. So everything goes back to the six sense doors. That's why in the 35.199, I gave you this sutta about the tortoise, again, remember about the story about the jackal, and also about this tortoise. The tortoise actually withdrew himself because he knew that jackal was coming to have his meal on him. So he actually withdrew his limbs, the five limbs, together with his head into the shell. And he doesn't actually want to he doesn't dare to actually extend his limbs and his head out of the shell. Otherwise, he will be dead meat, right? So from here, again, the Buddha is saying, just like this tortoise, you must actually practice like a tortoise. Whenever anything impinges on your mind, you know that this greed, hatred, and delusion has arisen in you. You must be well restrained. You mustn't let this. You mustn't actually be slave to these defilements and act upon. And do actions based on greed, hatred, and delusion. Otherwise, when you let this lobha, dosa, moha, be expressed out by way of speech or action or your intention or your mind, then it is already too late. The defilements have flowed out, and because of that, Mara actually has already had you as his meal, just like the jackal, this fox, once the tortoise actually extends his limbs out, then this fox, this jackal, would have eaten him. So the Buddha says it's very important for you to contain yourself within this tortoise. It's very much like what Ajahn Chah always says. It is fine when you meditate that the chickens are actually kept in the coop. The chickens actually move around in the coop. It's okay, But the only problem happens when the chickens are actually released out of the coop. That's where you actually have the chickens running around, helter-skelter, and they make a lot of commotion, right? So Ajahn Chah is actually saying that when you actually do your daily actions and you're faced with these sense objects, if you know that lobha, dosa, moha has arisen in you and you keep them within you and you try to remove them, it is fine. But not when you express the defilements out, in terms of your actions, your speech, and your intentions. That's when the chickens are out of the coop, and that's when you're in deep trouble, So it is very much the same as what Buddha has mentioned, the tortoise, but of course Ajahn Chah uses the simile of the chickens and the coop. So I already told you, that for you to be well restrained in your mind, you must actually watch your six sense doors, and this is confirmed, by this sutta of this tortoise, where the Buddha actually asks us, when you actually are faced with something, don't actually look at the signs and features of these sense objects, and try to move your attention away from these objects that are causing you all the greed, hatred, and delusion. When you hear anything at all that comes into your six sense doors, if you know that greed, hatred, and delusion have arisen in you, move your attention away from them. Do not pay attention to the signs and features. So as I mentioned to you, this is a samatha practice, because it is actually to ensure that you actually calm yourself down first. Don't when you're boiling with anger in your mind because you heard something that's unpleasant to you, move away. Don't actually dwell, on that anger first. Do something else. When you are sitting down, in a static position, like maybe cross-legged, and you are maybe doing anapanasati or rising and falling, and you just try to observe something, maybe the bodily sensations, and all this. You try to move your attention, whether your body is feeling heat because you feel angry, or your heartbeat is beating a lot faster because you're feeling very agitated of the anger. Or you can always, when you're doing this static samadhi, when you're doing this dynamic samadhi, you can actually do something else. Either you can do your house chores, or you can actually move your attention away and look at something, and maybe maybe look at something that's maybe your house chores, or maybe you look at some photos, or maybe you can listen to some songs that you like, and try to divert your attention from that anger first. Very much like what psychologists actually ask us to do. When you're angry, please count 1 to 10. Calm yourself down first, and that's actually is a samatha practice. Okay, but that is not the end of the story. Samatha is, of course, it's important for you to calm down. But as we know, eradication of these defilements can only be possible if we actually have wisdom. Wisdom is the one that actually will uproot ignorance. So in SN 35.247, the Buddha again introduced this simile of the 6 animals, and here I remember I told you the Buddha again, of course, talk about these 6 animals, but the difference here is the Buddha is saying that you must actually have a firm stake, a firm pillar, for these 6 animals to run around, so that they are actually well restrained and well controlled, you know. And the Buddha in this sutta, actually, he also talks about samatha, which means you actually move your attention away from the signs and features of the sense objects. But again, but here the Buddha actually went on, you know. The Buddha actually went on to explain that to actually develop this wisdom to combat or to battle with the defilements, you know, having samatha itself is just a preliminary, but you must proceed to actually practice what? Practice vipassana. And how do you actually cultivate this wisdom through vipassana? That's where the Buddha says you must actually practice what we call the Kayagata Sati, right? Yes, last week I went through with you, you know, in detail about this Kayagata Sati and how I explained about the, in a way, incorrect translation of the word Kayagata Sati, you know, because if you look at the original Pali text, Kayagato no Sati, Kaya here is translated as body, but if you look at the context of this sutta itself, Kaya actually means the mind, you know. It's not really mindfulness immersed in the body, but mindfulness immersed in your mind. Because the Buddha is asking you to be mindful, how your mind reacts to the six sense bases and how the six sense doors. So it's actually not so much on being develop mindfulness in the body, but it's actually mindfulness in the mind. So the Kaya itself, it depends on the context, you know, in the Pali Canon. Kaya sometimes does mean body, but in other contexts, you know, Kaya actually refers to mind. So if you want to understand this better, you can actually go to Bhante Agachita's bookshop. You know, this is actually explained in great detail, you know, why Kaya is not body all the time, but depends on the context. So that's why watching the mind is, the Buddha says you must actually use wisdom, you know, by actually using this Kayagata Sati, how the mind reacts to these six sense doors, you know, and from there you can actually practice Yoniso Manasikara, because when you actually practice this way, you are able to see how all the defilements arise in you, you know, in your mind, and how, you know, they are conditionally arisen through causes and conditions. And that's why in SN 35.152, you know, again, I mentioned to you, you know, it's very important for you to watch your mind, and just by watching the mind, you can become an arahant, you know. You can attain Sotapatti, you know, if you just watch your mind. And again, I highlighted the benefits of Kayagata Sati, you know, in the Anguttara Nikaya book of one, and also I mentioned to you, that's why how this samatha and vipassana are so important, you know, because if you are able to see how anger arises in you in true causes and conditions, you'll be able to see the non-self nature of this or these defilements, and you know, because they are actually fabricated by causes and conditions. It actually gives you the sense of it actually sort of tricks you, you know, to think that this anger in you is actually something that's permanent, you know, and because of that, you know, you're actually being swayed by this anger, and you actually do a lot of actions because of this ignorance of there's a self. But once you actually see how anger arises through causes and conditions, you know, then you find that actually this anger itself, there is actually no self to it, right? It's actually empty, you know. This anger arises because of the contact with the sense objects, and because of that, it arises because of the contact, there is actually feelings, perceptions, and volitions, and the anger. So once you see that, you find that, you know, it's actually non-self. Again, I also told you about this, how we contemplate of this non-self to develop wisdom, you know, through MN 148, the six sets of six, and also in terms of this, the sutta given by this Venerable Nandaka, you know, in respect of the oil lamp, and also in terms of the shadow of the tree, you know, we actually amply demonstrate, you know, what non-self, you know, means. So if you actually can contemplate this way, then you are using wisdom, you know, to combat this arising of these defilements, you know, in terms of the greed, hatred, and delusion. And again, you know, the Buddha in various suttas also actually highlighted that non-self must always be seen, you must actually know and see non-self in this way, you know, by always guarding your mind, you know, whether there's any of this lobha, dosa, moha arise in you, you know, apply this way that the Buddha has taught you, you know, to actually analyze what we call the Dhamma-vichaya, you know, the investigation of the Dhamma, you know, how, you know, these loba, dosa, moha, they are actually dependently arisen. They are fabricated, There is actually no self to this anger, greed, and delusion, It's just that you are being tricked. Ever since we are in samsara, we are being tricked as though this anger, there's a self, very much like a mirage. You find, at the far I see a lot of a huge pool of water, but when you go nearer, there's actually nothing there, because essentially this anger, there's nothing there. It's actually just empty, and also like a banana tree trunk, right? You peel and peel, in the end, there's nothing there, So it's just layers and layers. You feel as though there's a trunk, but actually there's no trunk, because they're all conditionally arisen. So the Buddha again highlights that if you can see this non-self, the Buddha in Samyutta Nikaya means Samyutta Nikaya, he actually says if you can see and realize non-self, then you are practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. The Buddha is saying that because non-self, as I mentioned to you, is a crown jewel of the Buddha's teaching. Buddha, on his day of night of enlightenment, he has realized non-self. That's why, he's able to uproot all the defilements and the asavas and the ignorance. That's why he's able to eradicate this paticca samuppada. He knows that this cycle of rebirth is actually being cut off, because he has realized the truth of non-self. Okay. So I also showed you this sutta of how Varamananda also, he has actually achieved enlightenment through non-self, and by looking at the six sense basis. And I, of course, highlighted to you, when you meditate, you must always see non-self. Don't just stop at impermanence. Don't just look at anicca. Make sure you look at anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Anatta must be realized. Okay, and of course I shared with you, the Buddha actually tells us, don't actually always, have this thought in your mind, I like this, I like that, or I don't like this, I don't like that. If you keep on doing this, forever you're in samsara, because you are not practicing correctly what the Buddha has asked you to do. Whenever you see something you like, I like, I delight, I like this, I like that. I don't like this, I don't like that. You feel very repelled, and you feel aversion to it. If you keep on having this, then you are not practicing what the Buddha has taught, and forever you are still in samsara. Because if you think about it carefully, like and dislike is actually what we call loba and dosa, right? Even though it is not greed and hatred, but like is actually a form of loba, It's a form of greed. If you say, I don't like, you don't like a person or you don't like a food, don't like is actually also aversion, is also dosa. So if you keep on having this loba, dosa, and moha, they all actually have the root in ignorance, the ignorance itself, the avijja, the ignorance. And if you look at the paticca samuppada, right, avijja pachaya sankhara, if you actually have avijja, you actually would have this sankhara. Sankhara means what? Actions with karma. And you're creating more and more karma, And because of this sankhara, right, because of sankhara, because of sankhara, sankhara pachaya vijnana, there's actually consciousness. Because once you act on it, consciousness arises. And then consciousness what? Consciousness is vijnana pachaya itself, then you actually have got what? Nama rupa, and the nama rupa then actually causes the six sense doors. So is the whole culprit is because of ignorance, because you keep on you keep on actually being pulled and enslaved, by this ignorance, and it manifests in terms of loba, dosa, moha. Forever you're creating more and more karma, It's like you are creating more and more fresh debt to yourself. When you haven't repaid your existing debt, you are creating more and more new debt to yourself. So it's actually something that's actually quite scary, right? Because you're always acting based on what? Loba, dosa, moha. You're always driven by avijja, and because of that, you are forever in samsara, You're creating more and more debts for yourself. So the Buddha says, please do not actually have this like and dislike, always develop, this equanimity, And how do you achieve this equanimity is actually when you have a sense of this passion, that actually, there's everything is non-self. There's actually no self to this. It's just an illusion. It's like a trick, So we must be aware of that. So actually, in this talk today, what I've covered for you last week, essentially is to contemplate loba, dosa, moha. It is actually something that is what you do, you contemplate internally, right? Because it's actually based on what loba, dosa, moha has arisen in you. So it is contemplation internally. Today, I'm going to be covering with you another way of contemplation, which is also equally important and equally powerful and effective, And the Buddha, in the suttas, you find that this way of contemplation is actually what I call the contemplation externally, Last week I talked about contemplation internally. This week I'm going to be talking to you about contemplation externally. And how do we contemplate externally? Okay, for this, may I refer you to this Anguttara Nikaya 4.165. There is this sutta, under sutta number 17. Actually, the Buddha actually explains that there are 4 ways of practice. The Buddha is saying that if you want to actually combat this defilements, loba, dosa, moha, you want to be well equipped. Right? When you go for a battle, you must be equipped to fight the defilements arise in you. So how do you equip yourself? The Buddha says that there are 4 ways of practice. One is called the impatient practice. The second one is called the patient practice. And the third one is called the self-control, or what we call the restraint practice. And the fourth is called the calming practice. Okay? And of course, the restraint practice I've already explained in great detail, which is internally, you contemplate internally. You look at your defilements that arise, and from there, look at how it is dependently arisen and is non-self. But in terms of externally, it is actually what we call the practice of cultivating patience. Patience, is something that's very important in our contemplation as well. And this is something, where you actually contemplate the sense object itself. Because earlier you contemplate the defilements, right? Now you move your contemplation to the sense object. Okay, so the Buddha says, how do you practice this? What is impatient practice? When the monk, when he's impatient, he cannot endure, any cold, heat, hunger, and thirst. Whenever flies, mosquitoes, or wind, or sun, or reptiles come onto him, he's not able to endure all this. There's no patient endurance. And whenever someone speaks rudely, to him and criticizes him, severely, he's not able to take these rude criticisms with a calm, and calmly and mindfully. Instead, he actually retorts back and scolds back. So the Buddha says, this is actually what we call impatient practice. You are not practicing patience. And but on the reverse, if you actually have patient practice, that's where the Buddha says, you're able to actually endure this, and you're able to endure this rude and unwelcome criticism. When somebody scolds you, immediately you feel very unhappy, right? You feel very angry, and you just feel like scolding back. That is how the world is, right? That is how we are being conditioned since young. Whenever someone scolds you, scold back. So that is actually what we call impatient practice. But the Buddha says you shouldn't behave like that. You shouldn't respond. But you must have patience, and patience is actually something that's very, very important. And once you're able to have this self-control as well as patience, then the Buddha says you're able to calm yourself. Actually, if you look at it, if you look at the internal contemplation of the loba, dosa, moha in your mind, as compared to this patience, I look at it in terms of the yin and yang practice. Yin is actually where you look at internally yourself, whether defilements arise in you. That is the yin practice. But when you look at the external sense object, it is actually the yang practice, right? So we must balance the yin and yang, when you actually meditate. So that's why it is important for me to have this second part of the talk, so that, to make it balance, meditation, rather than just looking at the defilements. But you must also look at the sense object itself, and cultivate patience, Then you'll be able to calm yourself. The Buddha says, once you have this, you're able to calm yourself. Whatever loba, dosa, moha arise in you, you're able to combat them and uproot them, And of course, this patience is a very powerful tool to have. In AN 8.27, the Buddha says that there is this 8 powers. What is this 8 power? The power of children is weeping. Children are very prone to crying, right? The Buddha says the power of children is weeping. The power of women is anger, okay? And the power of thieves is a weapon. The power of kings is sovereignty. The power of fools is to complain. The power of the wise is to deliberate. Because you're wise, you tend to deliberate, look at various issues and try to discuss and come to a consensus. You deliberate. That's the power of the wise. And the power of the learned is reflection and contemplation. You reflect on things, you reflect a lot. So that's the learned, when you read something, you reflect on what you have learned. And you see number 8, the Buddha says that the power of ascetics and Brahmins is patience, So patience is actually one of the 8 powers, and is something that is actually not quite highly emphasized enough, in our Buddhist, when we actually give, when we learn the Buddha's teachings, somehow patience is not given that sort of high position as compared to mindfulness, sampajanya, developing wisdom. But if you look at patience, the Buddha says is actually a power, and just to look at this power itself, you look at this SN 7.3, right? There is this sutta about the Buddha, at the time he was actually in Bamboo Grove, and at the time there was this Brahmin called Bharadvaja, and he actually heard a rumor that one of his Brahmin clan had actually gone forth. Someone from the Brahmin clan had actually renounced, and he had become a monk, under the ascetic Gautama. So immediately he fled up, he became very furious and angry and displeased, and he marched to the Buddha, and he abused, insulted the Buddha with rude, harsh words. But you see, the Buddha just kept silent, Okay, in return, the Buddha didn't say anything. He didn't scold back, but he just kept silent. Then this Brahmin Bharadvaja told the Buddha, "Oh, Master Gautama, I've beaten you. You are beaten. See, you are keeping quiet. After scolding you, you're just keeping quiet, like as though you don't even dare to even scold me back." But you see what the Buddha here says. He says, "Hey, I won't. He says, I warn things the fool. When speaking with harsh words." That he said that the Buddha actually says that he will not actually speak harsh words because he knows that patience is a true victory for those who understand. So again, the Buddha highlights this patience is very important. When you face with someone scolding you or insulting you, or spreading falsehood about you or slandering you, the Buddha says there's no need to speak with harsh words. Just have patience. Why? Because the Buddha says when you get angry and an angry person yourself, you make things worse for yourself. Because it's like the other person is really angry and he has really got poison in him, yet you want to partake that poison with him. Like this person has got maybe a cow dung in his hand, yet you want to touch him and have the cow dung as well. The Buddha says, is that what you want to do? When somebody is angry, you want to be angry in return. That is like you're sharing the poison with him, right? And that's what the Buddha says. When you don't get angry with an angry person, you win a battle that's hard to win. The Buddha says, you actually win the battle. So this patience, when you talk about patience in the Pali Canon, you will find that this Sakka, this Lord of the Devas in the Tavatimsa heaven, this Sakka in Tavatimsa heaven is the second level of the sense Deva realm. And the king who presides over this Tavatimsa heaven is a Deva called Sakka, and he's actually Lord of the Devas. So in the sutta, you find that this Sakka is somebody who actually cultivates and practices patience to a very, very large extent. And he always asks the Buddha why anger and why hatred arise in human beings as well as devas. And why does Sakka treasure patience so much? You can understand that if you look at the sutta under SN 11.11. Why is it Sakka now in the Tavatimsa heaven? Why is he so? Why does he actually place so much importance on patience? You can understand this if you look at this sutta, because the Buddha, at one time he was in Savatthi, he told the bhikkhus, in the past when Sakka, this Lord of the Devas, when he was still a human being, he had not become Sakka yet, he was just a human being yet, but he actually undertook 7 vows, which he actually followed very closely and very, very conscientiously. He actually followed these 7 vows. And what are these 7 vows? He actually made the 7 vows that, as long as I live, may I support my parents. That is the Sakka actually said. And as long as I live, may I respect my family and elders. And as long as I live, may I speak gently. And may I speak divisively. May I not speak divisively. And he also said, may I dwell at home with a mind devoid of stain of stinginess. freely generous, means that he wants to cultivate generosity, okay? And may I speak the truth all the time. So he actually practices right speech very gently. He doesn't speak divisively or he doesn't slander people, and he doesn't speak falsehood. He speaks truth all the time. And you look at number 7, he says, may I be free from anger. If anger should arise in me, may I dispel it quickly. Okay, so if you look at it, all the other things are actually quite easy for you to make a vow, right? Oh, may I have all this right speech? May I, respect my parents and family elders? Yes, that's actually quite achievable, for most people, But in terms of anger, may I be free from anger, And if anger arises in me, may I dispel it quickly? That is something that's quite difficult to observe, right? That's why you must actually take your hats off to Sakka, because he's able to observe this, that may I be free from anger. So that's why this vow has followed him. Even he has passed away and become Sakka, the Lord of the Devas in Tavatimsa heaven. This anger that he wants to overcome still continues in him, and he actually wants to be patient at all times. And so you see, when after this Sakka has become the king of the Devas in Tavatimsa heaven, you find that he always espouses and he always highlights and emphasizes patience. And we can see from this SN 11.8 there is this conversation between Sakka and as well as this Vairochana. Vairochana is actually the lord of the Asuras. If you know the Buddhist teachings, and in terms of the Deva realms, right, in this Tavatimsa heaven, actually there live two types of heavenly beings. One is called the Devas, the other one actually Asuras. Devas are actually very beautiful. They are actually very attractive, and they shine, But Asuras in return, they are actually ugly, because they don't observe their precepts that well, and also in the commentary it said that Asuras actually drink intoxicant. So because of that, the Devas actually sort of, they actually banish them into the foothill of Mount Sumeru. So these Devas, the Sakkas, Devas, the retinue, they live at the top of the mountain, but Asuras at the foothill. And these two are always at battle. They always battle with each other, and and they're always antagonized, and they always wage war against each other. So here there's a conversation between Sakka and this Vairochana, and this Vairochana actually starts by saying, he said that the man should make an effort, until his goal is achieved. Goals shine when achieved. So this Asura, king of the Asura, is saying, all beings actually have goals, and we will do whatever it takes to achieve that goal. But you know what Sakka says? This Sakka says, of goals that shine and when achieved, none is found better than patience. So the Sakka is saying, you can have all types of goals, but the best goal you can have is to develop patience. So again, this Vairochana responded by saying, all beings actually have goals. And then he says, for all creatures, association is supreme among enjoyments. So this Asura is saying that of all the enjoyment you can have in the heavenly realms, nothing can beat, when you associate, with all all the maybe the female devas, and then they actually have a wonderful time, the whole day through enjoying themselves, associating with each other, So the devas are actually quite gregarious as well, just like human beings. They like to mix with each other, So this Vairochana is saying, nothing beats mixing, associating with the devas more. But Sakka is saying, yes, association is supreme among the enjoyments, but of all goals that shine, none is actually found better than patience. So you see here, the Sakka is actually saying that patience is of paramount importance. Whatever you do, when you actually are faced with harsh words or difficult situations, you must always practice patience. And so the next question comes, how do you practice patience? Okay, so that's why I want to share with you again this another way of contemplating, which is contemplate externally your sense object. So here I want to share with you SN 22.59 on this sutta called the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta. The discourse on non-self. If you I'm sure most of you will know this Anatta Lakkhana Sutta is the second sutta that the Blessed One actually gave to the 5 ascetics, right? Okay, because the first sutta the Buddha actually gave the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, but the second sutta is Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, and this is a very powerful sutta because after listening to this sutta, the 5 bhikkhus became arahants. So you can imagine how powerful this sutta is. So in this sutta, the Buddha actually tells these 5 bhikkhus. He says, bhikkhus, form is non-self. Please, you need to read this very carefully. He tells the monks, the 5 monks, form is non-self. If form were self, form would not lead to affliction, right? It would be possible to have it of form, right? Let my form be thus, let my form not be thus. If you read this very carefully, what is the Buddha is saying that your body itself is non-self. If the body had a self, you'll be able to tell the body, please let my body not fall sick. When, for example, when you actually have flu or you have a cough, you can tell your body, please don't get sick. Please, may I not have flu or may I not have fever. Can you actually do that? No. The body is non-self. It doesn't listen to you. It actually is the body. The body is formed through causes and conditions, right? And because the body is actually dependently arisen through causes and conditions, you actually have no full control over this form. You cannot tell the form, may I be thus, or may I not be thus. For example, for somebody who is not attractive, maybe he thinks, may my nose be sharper, because you may have a flat nose. Then you say, may my nose be sharper. Do you think that your nose will be sharper? No. Or maybe you find that, may I have double eyelids, to be more handsome or prettier. Do you think that the body will respond to you by saying, okay, immediately I have double eyelids for you? That's totally impossible, right? That's why the Buddha says a form is non-self. You have to accept you are like that, through your karma, your past karma, You cannot just, of course, if you go for plastic surgery, it's a different question, right? But the question now is, can you just ask your body to change without going for plastic surgery, Can you do that? No. Because the past karma is be like that through causes and conditions. The same for feeling. The Buddha says there's no self to your feeling, no self, because you cannot control your feeling. When you hear of something unpleasant spoken about you, or you hear something, an unfortunate news, something happened, your car got knocked, or somebody scratched your car, do you think that you can say, please have pleasant feeling? No, immediately unpleasant feeling will arise in you, it is very natural. Or you tell yourself, may I not have this perception, may I have this perception that, this is good or this is not good, but your mind has already conditioned. For example, you don't like spaghetti, but because of past conditioning, and this perception arises, it is in your mind that I don't like spaghetti. Then when you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu, can you tell yourself, may I like spaghetti? I order spaghetti, may I like spaghetti? No, because perception is there already, it's already been, causes and conditions are there. So that's why the Buddha says you have to accept this with patience, You cannot control. Very much like, for example, somebody actually says something bad about you, or somebody spreads rumors, or somebody actually says, something, says perhaps they spread, maybe slanderous things about you, and you feel very unhappy, about this, Then the thing here is that can you actually actually ensure that they do not do that? Can you have control over that? So the Buddha says, no, you have to accept. They have been conditioned like that, For someone who scolds you, and he scolds you rudely or harshly, then you need to contemplate. He is by nature like that, He has been conditioned. Intrinsically, he's somebody who has a lot of dosa in him. You need to contemplate. Because of that, I have no control over him. And also, he is not a meditator. He doesn't know meditation. That's why he's not able to control his anger. So I accept him as he is. Because of that, now once you accept, your mind becomes calm, you're no longer agitated. So the Buddha says, it's through this, you are using non-self, you're able to contemplate, you have no control over this sense object. Whether somebody scolds you or something happens to you, or somebody spreads rumors about you, you feel very unhappy and angry, it's okay. Just accept, that this is how they are, There's no point for you to actually expect them to be otherwise. Or for example, maybe you find that things are not going your way. You find that maybe the flight is delayed, or maybe you find someone has done something different from the instructions that you have actually asked, and immediately you become angry, and you say, why is it like that? You want it your way, but the situation now is the causes and conditions have happened such that the flight is delayed, or maybe the plan has not gone according to the way you want. So you have to accept it as it is. But of course, if you can something that is within your control, of course you can try to improve. But after having made effort to improve, but if the end result is the same, you just have to accept it, because it's non-self, it's not within your control. That's why in this SN 11.4 again, there is this conversation again between this Sakka and also Vipacitti. Here, the situation is slightly different. Here, the Buddha tells the bhikkhus, once in the past, once upon a time, there was this war that actually was waged between the Devas and the Asuras. There was this impending battle. Both the Devas and Asuras were all getting ready to battle each other, And this Asura actually tells his retinue, he tells that if the Asuras win and the Devas are defeated, make sure you bring Sakka here and tie him up, by the four limbs and neck, and bring him to the city of the Asuras. And then Sakka also tells the Devas, he tells his Deva army, he says, if there is this battle between the Devas and Asuras, if the Asuras are defeated and the Devas are actually they win the battle, they achieve victory, so make sure you tie up this Vipacitti, by his four limbs and neck, and bring him to the Sudama Assembly Hall. Sudama Assembly Hall is actually a hall in the Tavatimsa heaven, So in this battle, what happened is the Asuras were defeated, and then the Devas actually won the battle. So the Devas actually tie up Vipacitti and brought him to this Sudama hall. And when in Sudama hall, this Vipacitti scolded and abused this Sakka with rude, harsh words. And Sakka just kept quiet, he didn't even respond back to him, So the Matali, right? Matali, is the Sakka's charioteer, right? He actually drives Sakka's chariot. So this Matali, he cannot stand it anymore, He tells this Sakka, why, Sakka, when you're face to face with this Vipacitti, Magava is actually Sakka, another name for Sakka. Why do you actually just keep quiet? Why do you endure him so patiently and listen to his harsh words? When you scold him back? So Sakka says, it's neither through fear nor weakness that I'm patient with Vipacitti. It's not because I'm weak or I fear him. It's because I know that this Vipacitti is a fool, How can a wise person like me actually engage in quarrel with a fool? Because this Sakka, he knows that this Vipacitti, is a fool. He doesn't actually practice the Dhamma. He doesn't observe the 5 precepts so well, and he doesn't want to actually argue with him because he knows that this is how Vipacitti is. No point for him to argue with him. Then it's just like you are just wasting your energy, and it's just exhausting for him. So he says there's no need for me to actually argue with him. So what Matali says, if you keep quiet, he'll climb up onto your head, and he says if you don't actually if you don't actually scold him back with anger, then this Vipacitti will become more and more daring, and you climb up onto your head, and does not then respect you, and that's what people normally say. If you are patient, people then they will come onto your head, and that is actually not good for you. But the Sakka says, I don't think so. The way to check the fool is actually not to scold back, but to maintain your peace mindfully. That's what Sakka says. So Sakka, as you say, he's somebody who is really, really patient. And Sakka says, if you repay an angry man with anger, it only makes things worse for you. So if you actually repay an angry man with anger, if you not repay an angry man with anger, you win a battle that's hard to win. This verse is very familiar, right? This is exactly what the Buddha actually said, in the earlier sutta that I mentioned. So you see here, Sakka, he actually does not argue with Vipachiti. You know why? Because he actually accepts Vipachiti as he is. He knows that he's not well cultivated in the Dhamma, so, and he just accepts him as he is, and he doesn't want to argue with him anymore, And you just accept, whether this person is full of anger, jealousy, or rude. That's how he is, So you just accept the sense object as it is. There's no point for you to be angry. And of course, Sakka, he is already a Sotapanna, right? We all know that, because from DN 21, Sakka actually became a Sotapanna after asking the Blessed One some questions about hatred. And why does hatred and jealousy happen among human and the Devas? And the Buddha gave a really extensive explanation for him to contemplate. And towards the end of the end of the talk, this Sakka actually, this stainless, spotless eye of the truth, the eye of the Dhamma actually arose in Sakka, and that he knows whatever that comes to be also ceases to be. So he actually realizes, he actually understands, he actually knows and sees non-self, And this also happened to the 80,000 Devas beside Sakadeva Raja. So you can see how powerful this thing about this non-self, you can actually extend it to contemplate the sense object. That this person has been conditioned to be like that, or the situation has been conditioned to be like that through causes and conditions, and you have no way of controlling them. You cannot fully control. If you want to control and make the sense object in another way than it has conditioned to be, then you are suffering. So I just want to share with you what Ajahn Chah actually says, right? Because Ajahn Chah, I understand that he also teaches non-self, by not controlling the sense object. He says, if you want a chicken to be a duck, and a duck to be a chicken, then you will suffer. So Ajahn Chah is saying, if you know that this sense object has arisen through causes and conditions, and there's no way for you to actually wish or to make this sense object otherwise, you just have to accept it with equanimity and patience, and endurance. And that's how you actually practice yourself. You cannot expect a chicken to be a duck or duck to be a chicken, because that's how they have been conditioned to be. If you want the chicken to actually swim in the water, or the duck to do something else, or like a chicken, to crow, how can you possibly have that? You only end up being exhausted and you suffer yourself. So when Ajahn Chah says this, essentially Ajahn Chah is saying non-self, contemplate on non-self in the sense object. The same goes for Ajahn Brahm. Ajahn Brahm says, when you stop controlling things, you stop disturbing life, then life stops disturbing you, So this is also non-self, because you can't control. You simply can't control, something that's arisen, through causes and conditions, And okay, that is one way of contemplating. Also, I want to share with you another way of contemplating to actually achieve patience. Here, I want to share with you this MN 22, what Buddha actually gave this sutta, what we call the Alaga Dupama Sutta, the snake simile. Here, the Buddha talks about praise and blame, So the Buddha says, if someone actually abuses or scolds or insults him as the Blessed One, what happens is, the Buddha says, on that account, O monks, the Tathagata, he himself, will not feel annoyance, nor dejection, nor displeasure in the heart. Why? Why does the Buddha say that? The Buddha will think, the Tathagata thinks, it is towards this mind and body aggregate, which was formerly fully comprehended, that they perform such acts, right? So the Buddha is saying, even if you scold me, it's okay, because I would just think that this sense object itself is non-self. It's actually empty. If you look at it, this whoever who scolds you, right, is actually empty. And the person, if he scolds me, I also have empty. There's actually just body and mind. There's actually no self to it. So if you contemplate that the person who actually scolds you or reviles you or abuses you, there's no self to this person. Essentially, you feel that there's no point to get angry over him, right? Just like what is mentioned by the Buddha in this next simile. So again, this non-self is so important. As another way of contemplation. Because earlier, you should contemplate, you have no control over the sense object. Now you contemplate this sense object as non-self. At one time, this Holiness Dalai Lama actually did a pilgrimage to Bodh this temple, the Mahabodhi temple, and during one of the interviews, actually the reporters actually asked the Holiness Dalai Lama, he actually asked the Holiness Dalai Lama, what is so special about the Buddha's teaching, okay? And the Holiness Dalai Lama actually just told the reporters that the reason why we feel anger, and a lot of these destructive emotions. He used the word destructive emotions, like you want to fight with someone, battle with someone. You want to actually scold. You want to abuse. You hate someone. It's because you actually have this misperception in your mind that this sense object that's causing you anger as having a permanent self, So if you actually, if you actually contemplate what the Buddha has actually taught in terms of dependent arising, then you will find that that this sense object actually has no self, and that's how hatred, and these destructive emotions can actually be eradicated. Is the antidote to that. So that's why when we actually look at sense object as a self, that's where we have all this loba dosa moha in us, because we keep on thinking that he abuses me, he struck me, he robbed me, So if you have this hatred because of this that you feel that there is a permanent self to this sense object, you feel a lot of anger towards this sense object, and because of that, your hatred is not actually reduced, is not appeased. But the Buddha says, if you do not think about he abused me, or he robbed me, or he actually struck me, then you actually have no ill will towards this person. So the second way of contemplating is to contemplate this sense object as what? As anatta, right? There's actually no self to it. And then after that, next I also teach you the third way of contemplating, to contemplate externally by developing patience, and to develop calmness and equanimity, is actually by contemplating what we call, viparinama dukkha, because if you look at it, if the sense object, something that causes you a lot of pain or sadness or anger, that object itself is actually conditioned by causes and conditions, right? It is actually a reason, through causes and conditions dependently. And when something is a reason through causes and conditions, it is inevitable that this sense object will deteriorate and worsen, whatever it is, whether you look at yourself, your body, even your eyesight, everything will deteriorate, It is something very natural, when you actually buy something, the item becomes old, when you get old, your eyesight, gets worse, your movement becomes more difficult, everything actually is in the process of getting worse, in the process of deteriorating. So you must contemplate. This sense object itself is also subject to this deterioration, what we call actually the viparinama, and because of what? Because this sense object, is arisen through causes and conditions, and once these causes and conditions actually change, this sense object will also change, and when they disappear, this thing will also disappear. So that's why you must contemplate. This sense object is also subject to deterioration. And here in AN 5.49, right, there is this sutta about King Pasenadi. At one day, this Buddha, was actually in Jeta Grove in another Pindika's monastery, and during this time, King Pasenadi, he is the king of the Kosalan kingdom, right? He actually went to see the Buddha, and he bowed down and sat at one side. Now, when he was actually in the presence of the Buddha, someone actually came to tell him that his beloved wife, Queen Malika, had actually died. And someone actually told him, Your Majesty, Queen Malika has died. And when King Pasenadi heard about this, King Pasenadi became miserable and became sick at heart, and his shoulders drooping, his face was brooding, and lost for words, which means he became extremely sad, and depressed. So when the Buddha actually saw the king in such a state after hearing the news of Queen Malika's death, the Buddha actually tells this king personality, he says that there are these 5 things that great king that cannot be gotten by anyone. Whether you are a human or a deva or a Brahma, in the world, you cannot get these 5 things. And what are these 5 things? May what is subject to aging not age. If you wish that I please let me not age. Please let me not grow ill. Please let me not die. And please there's may this thing that you love not be subject to any end. And may what is subject to destruction not be destroyed. So the Buddha says there are these 5 things that no matter whether you are a Deva or a Mara or a Brahma or whether you are a recluse or a Samana, it doesn't matter. These 5 things are definitely things that you cannot definitely get. You wish that whatever you like will not age, will not grow sick or ill, will not die, will not come to an end, will not be destroyed. So these are the 5 things that definitely you cannot have these 5 things. So the Buddha says that if you do not actually reflect in this way, that things will actually deteriorate and become worse. Then you are bound to suffer. So that's why it's very important for us also to contemplate when something happens to you. For example, for example, say you bought a brand new car today, and then the next day someone actually scratched your car, right? And you became very unhappy and very sad. But you need to look at it, this car itself, is subject to destruction, right? It's subject to deterioration and worsening, It may be new, but after a while it will be destructed, So it's because it's anatta, it's new, right? It's because it's new, you just bought it, it's new, but over time it become worse, So if you can look at it that way, it's anatta, things change, it will get worse. So my car will one day also become, a scrap metal, So if you can think of that way, at least you feel not so agitated, you feel not so bad, because you actually use the power of what? Power of contemplation of this deterioration, due to non-self, due to anatta. So that's why I just want to share with you what Ajahn Chah again says. There is this quote that's written in his book. One day, some people came to the master and asked, someone came and asked Ajahn Chah, he says, how can you be happy in a world of such impermanence, where you cannot protect your loved ones from harm, illness, or death? Because the world is anicca, right? How can you be happy in such a world where everything is so impermanent? So someone asked Ajahn Chah, and then Ajahn Chah actually responds by saying, the master, Ajahn Chah actually held up a glass, and said, someone gave me this glass, it holds my water admirably, and it glistens in the sunlight. I touch it, and it rings, wow, it's so new, such a nice glass. One day, the wind may blow it off the shelf, or my elbow may knock it from the table, I know this glass is already broken, so I enjoy it incredibly. So Ajahn Chah is so wonderful, he's actually so much wisdom in him. What he's trying to say is, because he has actually contemplated this glass, one day it will break, it's subject to breaking. It is not permanent, it's due to causes and conditions. The glass is non-self, you cannot have this glass forever. What has arisen must be subject to cessation. So one day, if I knock this glass off the table, or the wind blows it off the shelf and it breaks and shatters into pieces, I'm okay, because I'm really fully prepared. I'm mentally prepared already, that this glass itself is actually non-self and subject to destruction. So Ajahn Chah is saying, yes, it may be impermanent, but you must keep on contemplating this non-self, this deterioration, in whatever that is dependently arisen. It become worse, But at the same time, the flip side, of course, is because it's due to causes and conditions, things will also become better, right? For example, you feel very dejected, that you feel that I'm actually in a very difficult situation, financially I don't have enough money, I'm in a very difficult situation. But you must also take heart that whatever difficult situations you have are also not permanent, right? They're also subject to causes and conditions. Things will be better, and if I'm not sure whether you heard of this story of the King Solomon's ring. There is this this phrase that's inscribed on the ring that says, this soon will pass, This soon will pass. So it's the same, whenever you are in a difficult position, say for example, you're in a very difficult job, you have a very difficult boss, or you find, I'm in a very difficult position, I'm not well, or due to a lot of conditions that you are in a very adverse condition. But the Buddha says, do not actually be disheartened, Yes, you are in a difficult position, but things will be better, things will also turn for the better. If you put in effort, if you put in the right conditions, things will be better, things will actually improve, That's why, that's what the saying goes, this will soon pass as well. So whether it's for worse or better, that's why you're able to keep this equanimity in you. So based on what I've just discussed with you, there are these three ways, right, in terms of patience, contemplating externally, by looking at the sense object. First of all, contemplate that what this sense object that's causing you the defilements, it is actually not within your full control. It's being this sense object is like that because of causes conditions. There's no way you can actually change it. You cannot expect a chicken to be a duck or duck to be a chicken. So just accept it equanimously, and from there, your mind will become more tranquil, and you become much calmer, and rather than agitated. And secondly, look at yourself in terms of non-self. Whoever who scolds you or reviles you or abuses you, just think this person who reviles me actually is non-self. He's actually empty. You may be spreading rumors or lies about me. It's okay. You have to bear your karma yourself. But this sense object is actually non-self. I shouldn't be agitated because of that. It's actually empty. What is there to be angry about? I don't want to be disillusioned, by the mirage that this person that is causing me harm, and because of that I direct my hatred toward this object. But actually, this object is no self. It's just emptiness. But you are just being tricked, and you act based on this great hatred and delusion, and because of that you create bad karma for yourself. So the Buddha says, look at it in terms of non-self. It's empty. And third, contemplate in terms of viparinama. Whatever happens, things will actually get worse, deteriorate. Whether it's somebody you like, your family member, people you treasure, your family member, your relatives, or maybe even your pet dog or your pet cat. If something were to happen and they actually depart from us, so we have to also contemplate what the Buddha told King Pasenadi about Queen Malika. These 5 things you must always remember. Everything is subject to destruction. You can never actually hope that whatever is subject to destruction will not be destructed. Because why? Because it's non-self. It's through causes and conditions. How can you possibly hope for something that has arisen through causes and conditions not to be destructed? Because they are due to conditions. That's why they arise. They are not independent. So once the causes and conditions disappear, then this sound object will also disappear. So everything is in a state of deterioration. Everything becomes worse. So there will come a time when they will have to. You will become separated from people whom things that you actually cherish and you treasure. So that's why the Buddha says, and of course, the reverse is also true. Whenever you are in a difficult position, also think, that this difficult position will not actually last forever. It will become better. Once you put the right effort and conditions, this will soon pass. So it makes you more equanimous and much calmer. In the face of adverse conditions. So, like what the Buddha says. When we practice the Dhamma, it's very important for us to combat the defilements. So I've already explained to you the internal, the contemplating internally, which is looking at your defilements, looking at the 6 sense doors, the causes and conditions, looking at it in terms of how is non-self through Kayagata Sati. That is the yin part, the internal part. The yang part is actually your external contemplation. Look at the sense objects in terms of these 3 things, what I call the control, the anatta, and also in terms of the deterioration, what I call the CAD. Remember this CAD, AutoCAD, CAD is actually what you actually contemplate externally. So if you can follow this, you're able to combat the defilements much more effectively. So I just want to share with you what Ajahn Chah actually says. If you are still following your likes and dislikes, you have not even begun to practice Dhamma, you know. So the Buddha, Ajahn Chah is actually, he actually is sounding out what the Buddha actually mentioned in the sutta, right? You know, please do not always have delights for things you like, you know, and aversion towards things you don't like, you know. Like and dislikes, you know, are actually lobha, dosa, moha, and they're actually rooted in ignorance. If you keep on doing this, you're forever in this cycle of paticca samuppada, and you're all forever in this cycle of samsara. And to make it, and to be, and also to also bear in mind that essentially, what the Buddha has asked us to do is actually not to just observe the kilesas only, you know. You just don't observe the defilements and say, oh, yeah, anger, or greed, you know, and then, you know, then that's it, you know, you just come back to your meditation. No, the Buddha is saying you must actually confront the defilements and combat them through wisdom by developing the internal and external contemplation. That's why Ajahn Chah, this famous quote by Ajahn Chah is saying, anything which is troubling you, anything which is irritating you, that is your teacher, you know. You must confront it. Do not run away from these defilements because they are your teacher, you know. You are able to contemplate because only by looking at defilements, you're able to contemplate through wisdom, you know, and also through abandoning by using samatha and vipassana. And again, Ajahn Chah says here, peace is within oneself to be found in the same place as agitation and suffering. You know. Peace, you can find peace in the same place as suffering and agitation. It is not found in the forest or hilltop, nor is it given by a teacher. When you experience suffering, you can also find freedom from suffering. Trying to run away from suffering is actually running towards it. So you see, Ajahn Chah is really a very wise teacher, you know, that he has actually understood that, you know, non-self is very important for you to confront the defilements and combat them, you know, and do not just run away by saying, oh, you know, just noting and just go away. No, you must actually confront it, understand why, how is it non-self, you know. And the other thing also, I just want to highlight to you, meditation is not just about emptiness, you know, like just observing your breath, you know, and then when something comes, don't bother about it and come back to your primary object. Actually, meditation, if you look at the sutta, it is a lot about contemplation and reflection. Just like, you see, Sakadeva Raja, he actually became a Sotapanna because he actually asked the Buddha's questions about hatred, and Buddha asked Saka to contemplate, and through contemplation, Saka became a Sotapanna, you know. So, meditation is about reflection and contemplation as well in the Vipassana scenario, you know. Of course, Samatha is not really contemplation, but Vipassana, you must contemplate. So, like I mentioned to you again about this, about controlling and being well restrained. In conclusion, we must make sure that, you know, we combat the defilements. Just like what I explained to you about the tortoise, that he does not extend his limbs and his head towards outside. You know, means you do not actually express your lobha, dosa, moha, your greed, hatred, and delusion outwards. You know, and it becomes, you know, a fresh, unwholesome karma, you know, and you're just adding more and more bad debts to yourself, you know, from all the bad debts you carry forward from the samsara. Now you're carrying more and more bad debts to yourself. So Buddha is saying you must, like the tortoise, that keep limbs to himself, you know, and don't try to express it, you know, and try to remove and uproot the defilements within yourself, you know. Do not extend outside, because once you extend outside, then Mara has actually won. He's actually won, and, you know, he has got victory over you, you know. This Mara has actually won the battle, you know, and, you know, he knows that you have created bad karma, and, you know, he's very happy because you are more, you know, you are in samsara, you know, longer and longer because of this. So that's why Ajahn Chah is saying that when you meditate, you must, like the chicken kept in a coop, you know. You mustn't let the chicken out of the coop. You know. As long as the chickens are kept within the coop, it's okay, you know. But once you let the chicken out of the coop, that's when, you know, you have a lot of trouble, you know, a lot of this disorderly, you know, the chickens will run, you know, all over the place, you know. And that's when you actually behave, you know, or speak or to act, by body, speech, and mind, all the unskillful and unwholesome karma, is being performed by you because of lobha, dosa, moha that's actually being expressed outside, just like the chickens being let out of the coop, So Ajahn Chah says, you must make sure the chickens are kept in the coop all the time, Do not let the chicken get out of the coop. So that, in a nutshell, is my talk. I hope I have given you a very clear path, how to actually meditate in order for you to overcome greed, hatred, and delusion. Whenever they arise to your sense doors, remember the yin and the yang, must be in tandem, looking at the defilements, but also look at the sense objects, how you're able to come to terms with them and achieve, a sense of calmness, mindfulness, and also in terms of being equanimous, and not be agitated, by lobha, dosa, moha, which will actually keep you longer and longer in samsara.